Welcome to Behind the Smiles podcast, where we go beyond the surface while talking to labs and DSOs about everything your highlight reel doesn't show. If you're into stories, strategy, and a little bit of startup chaos, this one is for you. Hi, welcome everyone. I want to welcome you to a new segment that we are just starting to launch, which is called Behind the Smiles podcast. So we wanted to start again. It's not the new year, but we wanted to start this year with a new segment, something that goes deep into what SmileGenius is all about, but also bringing some key speakers. Starting with SmileGenius kind of senior leadership team today, but I think eventually going into other areas as well. But today I want to welcome first time on the video format, Vikas Prasanna. Vikas is our Chief Product Officer of SmileGenius Dental, and I think it's the first time. So we'll get to know Vikas much better, what his area is, what are different product developments he's working on. But yeah, well, Vikas, welcome to our first episode of BTS podcast.
Thank you so much. It's an honor. Now that I've seen so many podcasts of you before, that I'm getting to be a part of this. So yeah, pretty excited to talk about stuff today. I know it's a more casual thing, but it's going to be nice.
Yeah, so I think we'll keep it casual, and we'll take it from there. But I think it's the intention is I think all the customers that we have who might be listening to it, or other people who don't know much about us before they see an email, which is very much like a black and white text, two-dimensional thing. I think it's usually good to put those faces, and that's the intention behind this podcast, that we do that on a fortnightly basis, if not weekly, and kind of share what's happening behind the scenes. People get to know us more, and also the backstory as well, which is where I would like to start that question. So I think, can you walk everyone through back to the timeline when you kind of decided to join SmileGenius? How did it all happen? And did you ever imagine that you would be running a company or a startup?
Yeah, good question. So I think our story probably goes back to my wife and probably your best friend who have been related to each other. And I think it all started from a Diwali party where we first probably met. And that's when I think I connected with you for the first time. And it was only during COVID when I was trying to launch one of my own personal ventures and terribly failed because the three people that we were on working on that idea were not committed to going full time. And I think that was the biggest lesson that I came out of, came out with. And I think, when I was just browsing through LinkedIn, and I was just largely interested in participating in, startups and being an entrepreneur. That was kind of one of the things that I always wanted to do anyway, for as long as I can remember. And that's when, I bumped into one of your posts on LinkedIn and I reached out to you, where I said, hey, can we grab a coffee? I just want to know what you're doing. And thankfully you had an open door for it and you said, yes, let's chat. And I think that's how we sort of started talking to each other. And yeah, here we are today. I think what, close to 3 years later, where I first started off being an advisor, more on the product side, helping the company just shape up the technology that was being developed and was being shipped to the customer. And now here I am as a co-founder, a full-timer as well. So yeah, it's been quite a ride. But pretty interesting part that also I have in my mind that I want to ask you is about how did this actually, how was this, how did the inception happen? Like, how did it go from being an idea to a startup? And where did the idea come from? Were there any problems that you came across, or was this something that came out sudden, or came out as a random thing?
I think the idea about SmileGenius, right? So I think it wasn't SmileGenius as a startup and a product and a platform, I would say, that people see nowadays. Originally, we thought of this of an idea of kind of testing the aligner market, and we started selling some ancillary products that, like, the aligner kits, aligner white, some whitening kits, some cleaning kits, so all those supplementary products, which were not the core workflow products, and it wasn't digital. It was more like an e-commerce platform, and that was the first version. But originally, like, I'd been thinking of starting something. Right, the story all about SmileGenius was that I don't know how many people know, but I'm not a dentist. I think a lot of people think that I'm a dentist. I'm not a dentist, but I think both of us and all of us in the co-founding team, we have this. We want to solve problems, right? So that's where we are problem solvers, and most of us are engineers by any kind of first graduation or original how we were educated and by profession. So I think that problem solving thing was always there. So when I saw my wife, she was a dentist, and I found that dentistry was way behind than other industries. So, you've seen retail, finance. We talk about CRM. We talk about ERP. All those sorts of solutions and softwares and the acronyms that we use. When it comes to dentistry, yes, there is an appointment booking system. There's a note taking, but there was no workflow solution as such. And that's where you're finding that that every dental lab or a business was trying to reinvent the wheel when it came to setting up their own aligner operations. So that's where we thought, and that's where the engineering 101 came in. Although I had left engineering, since so many years before that, but it was kind of, can we build something that could be replicated across different businesses so that every business doesn't have to spend that much amount of time and money to rebuild that, and something that is a plug and play solution. So the whole idea about the startup was, a, I understood the startup side of things, and b was that there was this gap within dentistry, and again starting with clear aligners, because there was a real commercial workflow need for that side of the market. But I think that's was the initial phases, how SmileGenius was born, or kind of incepted.
Great. I mean, you said that you started off, doing these product sort of e-commerce sale, right? So you probably have seen so many pivots, and I know that what we're building right now and what we're shipping right now is something completely different, right? So obviously you saw change along the way, but then how did you like when you see change along the way? It's also extremely difficult, and especially with with multiple co-founders in the team, and also having our own sort of tech team and like a customer success team. How do you go about navigating that change? Like how do you like work on disagreements? What is like thing that maybe one thing that you would probably admire of about how others work within the team?
I think in general, I think it's all about change, right? So I think one of the things that I got used to, I would say, initially, because I came way before other people in this, and it was more about kind of getting accustomed to things changing around you. So startup is, and I think it's kind of, when you work in a very big enterprise, you expect change once every year. When you're working in a startup, you're expecting change every hour, if not every minute. So it's kind of that mentality. It doesn't come naturally, I would say. It's something that we kind of arrive to, or something that we develop. It's a learned skill. I still don't think I'm the best at managing change, but I think I'm learning. I have improved from where I was, and I think just you see that. And when it comes to any other kind of managing the team or changes, and kind of other things that happen, I think it's kind of communicating that change is part of a startup or a company. That I think team, including the co-founders or the teammates, I think they shouldn't expect that everything is set in stone all the time. And the reason behind that change is because things around us are always changing, right? So you come in for a startup with some idea, right, which is more of a like, it's not a scientifically proven idea that it will sure shot be a jackpot and something that will solve the biggest problem in the world. You come with some assumptions, and when you see that your assumptions are being tested and some of the assumptions were wrong, then you try to change, or you can stay your track, in the same track. But when you try to change, that's when you have to change the course that you were headed. The team has to be aligned with that, and you have to be open and communicative with the team. So I think it's about that, having that open culture, I would say, with the team, and just communicating that the change is part of it. Right, every day we are talking about so many things, like,
Yeah.
and I think that's where the strategy doesn't mean it. I don't know what you think about, what's your answer to that. Like, I know that a lot of times you would have seen, and me coming with something first, and then the next day, it's totally different, and in between there could be 10 other conversations that I had with customers, and that's why it got changed. So what's your kind of take on your side of product?
Well, I mean, obviously there's a lot of chatter about, especially in the product community, about how there should be a product strategy and whatnot. Like I've never got a perfect sense of what that actually means. I think it has a, yeah, I mean, especially in a startup like us, where we are early stage, like you said, every day is like different. We are learning so many new things about the domain. When we feel that we know a lot about the domain already, there's this new customer or a new lead who throws a completely different curveball at you, and you kind of realize that, okay, so I'm still like learning, right? Yeah. So I think strategy is very tactical. It's not very future looking. I think what we are after is definitely the mission and the goal that we have, and I think that's probably the only constant for me. As in, what's our mission, what's our goal. Strategy is always changing along the way. So, that's how I see it. I see it more as a tactical sort of an instrument. But that being said, like, how do you go about, admiring, what do you sort of admire in other people? Is it the things that you do that they also do that you admire, or is it more on things that you lack that you
I,
admire
I,
from
I
them?
I think I think psychology, from psychology side of things, I think naturally people incline to people who are similar. I know it says that opposite poles attract, which is a different side of things, but usually you try to find people who think similar to you, but that's something like kind of subconsciously that's what you admire. But I think consciously, if you ask me, I think it's people like, I think honesty is a big part of where and I think you know me quite well now. I think that credibility, honesty, trustworthiness, right? So I think that's where it all comes in. Like if I know someone, like in our team, someone whom we are hiring, um, I think I've some edge in that EQ side of area, if not IQ, at least EQ. That at least I do think that I can judge a person, on basis on where their head is at and where their heart is at, and I think that helps. I admire honesty more than the skills, I would say, right? Because skills is something you can learn, but if someone is not honest or trustworthy or not transparent, and I think that's where is a red flag for me. But apart from that, I think I like everyone who's putting hard work. So anyone who is doing hard work, there's a huge amount of respect from my side. But I think that for me, the biggest value that I value, which is value which I value, but that's honesty. What about you?
Great. I think for me, it's kind of, especially in the startup world, I think complementary skills is something that I value quite a lot. One of the things that I think we both have learned along this journey is the fact that you don't have to be perfect at one thing, and you don't have to become a master at it. I think running a successful startup, and I mean, success can vary and be subjective based on who you're talking to, but um, running a successful startup really means, how are you doing a lot of things slightly better than average than most other people would. And I think that I last 6 months, especially, being here full time has meant that it doesn't matter if you don't have that skill. It's the attitude of, I want to go after that. I want to do something, and I want to learn about it, and then I want to implement it. Could be a success, could be a failure, but you learn along the way. And you might not be the best person for it, but at this point in time, you are the best person to solve that. And that's purely because of attitude. I think as you kind of grow and, grow the company and scale the company, that's when, things will slightly shift towards how do you manage people better. But right now, it's very much an operator mode.
Yeah. I think one thing that you mentioned, right? So it's kind of one thing that I learned in the last 3.5 years, is that, you always find answers. I think how hard you are hitting, to move forward, or how closely, you are observing the responses for the actions that you are taking, and you are changing course, or, it's not that you're just, banging your head on the wall and it's not moving and you're expecting why it's not moving. So I think just be observing, taking that input, but also not giving up. And I think that's something that's very important, that eventually what I've found, that there's always an answer hidden somewhere. And I think it depends on how much persistent you are and how much tenacious you are to not give up and keep at it. And just the other thing is keep observing. There's a saying that you can't run east looking for sunset. right? So you have to make sure that you are headed in the right direction. That's where the strategy comes in. But yeah, the strategy cannot be a 5-year strategy or a 4-year strategy, but strategy helps us take decisions. I think that's something we need to acknowledge, that because otherwise, like, the biggest part of our day to day is taking decisions, right? And I think the attitude should be that yes, we will take a decision, we'll know, we'll learn, we'll adapt, and we'll change it if it's needed. But again, let's go into that strategy. So I think, okay, let's walk through your role, Vikas, right? So I think a lot of people would want to know, they may know you, or they may not know you, but I think if you want to talk about first, I think your role, how second is that how important is product in a tech company. If you talk about why product has been given so much importance, and in the space where we are. And also, and product is not just the digital product, it's also the customer, the communications, the engagement, if it's part of the product. So I think let's start with your role first, and I think a lot of people don't know. I think let's, and then we'll go into the product. What's the definition of a real product?
So product is something, it could be a bunch of like different services that you're bundling up and, you're selling it to a customer, right? And it might not necessarily mean it's a technology product. It could be a service product, it could be a hardware product, could be anything. So it's a pretty loose definition in that sense. But that being said, what we are doing here is that we're trying to kind of not, I wouldn't say we're creating a category within dentistry, but what we're trying to do is we're solving an actual gap that exists between the labs and the clinics. So when you think about SmileGenius, the main problem that we're trying to address is the communication gap that exists between the labs and the clinics. And if you kind of wear that lens of how is communication being solved within the space and take a step back for a second and just observe, what sort of solutions are out there, you see that most solutions are either addressing the back end part of a lab where there are a number of softwares that allow a lab to manage their back end, which is all their supplies, which is all their which is all their manufacturing bits and so on, and making sure that the manufacturing is always happening on time and there's a process set to it. But then that's one side of it. And then when you look at the other side of it, which is on the clinic side, like you said earlier, there's a lot of softwares around patient management system, which is a very front facing system for the clinic that allows the clinic to be able to collect payments, do appointments, make sure that they're managing patient information well for all sorts of compliance purposes and so on. What we are doing is kind of in the middle, which is between a clinic and the lab. There are so many manual methods through which they're communicating with each other. So they're using like 5 or 6 different platforms to be able to communicate about how I want a particular order to be, and so on. And this causes a lot of frustration. It's financial loss. It's loss of admin time. Conversions are much slower when the labs are trying to go after clinics and making sure that they want to sell their products, right? And that's exactly the gap that we are trying to fill in as SmileGenius, and that's the product that we're trying to build here. And essentially, we started off with a niche within dentistry, so we have not gone after the entire dentistry. But one of the great parts of one of the great parts about us is that we picked the most difficult problem to solve. And so the aligner workflow is a much more engaging workflow between the lab and the clinic. So we got into the most difficult problem within dentistry, and then we learned so much about it. And when we just extrapolate ourselves and look at the 30,000 feet view now, and just look at dentistry in general, we now know that a lot of these other workflows are much simpler than what you've already built. And I think that's one of the exciting bits about product. So, one thing was to talk about what does product mean, but then the other thing to talk about is what does product thinking mean? So it's about, being able to address the most difficult problems in a sort of a scalable manner. And that's what, that's the art of being a good product manager, as to how do you take the toughest problems and solve it in a method that allows you distribution, right? And distribution is a very key part of it. And that's what we are trying to unlock as a product in here.
And because if you talk about, like, let's pick some examples of the product, because I think a lot of dental community, and that's my feeling, right, that a lot of people who are in this industry, uh, product is a very techie word, right? Still, product could mean, we talked about that, product could mean different things to different people. But if you think of that, right? So let's pick some examples which could be common to people, right? So let's say, I don't know, if you want to pick, let's call, for example, WhatsApp or Slack, or pick any examples that you choose, right? So I think what makes a product a good product, right? So what are the, if we just in a very simple way, right, what are we looking at which creates a lot of adoption, success, people find it easy, they want to come back to that product. So like just on a high level, what do you think makes a good product, and what are those key values that on a day-to-day basis that you try to imbibe in your team, and the, the signature of the product that you are putting on to all the things that we are shipping out from Smile Genius?
Really good question, actually. What you are trying to address is probably going back a couple of minutes of where I was coming from where I was coming from was about really addressing what is the problem that we are trying to solve within the space that we are in. And like I said, we are trying to solve the communication issue, right? So for what you need to like really understand is that you need to make sure that the problem that you're looking at is actually a problem in a sense where it can financially have, some, it can financially, be kind of scaled up, and, it has to be big enough for somebody to care about. So that's the first part of, this whole figuring out. And once you understand that, okay, this is a big enough financial problem, be it cost savings, be it revenue generation, be it whatever it is, but it has to be synonymous across all levels of, all levels of scale. And if you're looking at that sort of a problem, what you then have to nuance into is to essentially understand, okay, within this whole workflow of communication, what are the major touch points that, the current solutions are not filling, or, there's really a lot of frustration between, the labs and the clinics. And building a great product not only means that you're building a solution, but you're building the solution for the right problems. And that's exactly what makes great products, right? So you took the example of WhatsApp, and I think that was a phenomenal example. So when WhatsApp came out and they launched, they went after just one problem. It was communicating with each other. That was the problem. And then they said you can have one-on-one chat with anybody that you want who has a phone number. So it was a pretty simple problem. It was, when it came out, it was one of a kind. A lot of people did not see, a lot of people did not have similar apps. I think what WhatsApp did really well was not to just address that problem, but also the user experience. They made sure that it was so seamless and slick that people were just like so happy using it, and they never had an issue in terms of user experience. So that I think is also a great advantage that you have when you start off as a startup. So when you're building a startup, that's one of your biggest moats, because you have a small team and your changes can be quick. You can make sure that the user experience can be phenomenal, that the big players will take a lot of time to catch up. And I think that's probably one of the other ways as to how you kind of go about building a great product. Not that big companies don't do it, but it's something
That's
that's much
true.
easier for startups to do.
Yeah. And I think I want to address that point as well, because I think a lot of times, because you and me, we sit with clients on calls. It could be sales calls, it could be customer success calls, it could be follow up monthly calls. And one of the things that we always wonder about, or are being asked, or some of our clients answer, is that, you know, why would clients choose a startup over an existing enterprise, which could be having a, let's a group company, right, who has multiple departments, one of the departments being software of some kind. And I think one of the things, and I'll get your view, but I'll just share mine first, is I think, yes, people do think startups as companies who might be a bit risky if they think, but I think the value that they bring is actually solving the problem which is not being solved by those big enterprise. And I think that's where the difference is, that the agility, that and the flexibility and the scalability. And I think thinking from that, you mentioned about the product, and I think a lot of startups think from what's best in the market. They don't have to go through 10,000 approvals within the organization, so that brings things faster to market. It helps companies scale. it helps customers kind of launch their services sooner, rather than relying with something that is being offered as an add-on by an enterprise or a group company. But what kind of things that you see in terms of where the startups such as SmileGenius kind of overtake those big enterprises which have existed for 40 plus years, sake of argument, right? And where do you think we bring a more advantage and an edge to our clients, and why do clients use us, in a way? I think that's in a more general way.
I think it could be sort of a cliche answer, but a lot of it depends on the kind of people who run it as well. I mean, you could have startups where, yes, it is, first time founders who are running it. But it could be through founders who haven't built scalable systems before, who haven't like worked on scaled products before, or have worked even in startups that have scaled very quickly before, right? So all that is super valuable experience. So I think one of the case studies, or examples that I can give, not a case study, is how we managed to scale and ramp up our clinic adoption, right? From, I think we were about 1.5 years ago, we were serving, less than 10 clinics. And then we suddenly ramped up to, 1,000 plus clinics today. And we did that through one customer success person. And, one senior customer success person looking at not just like at the process of how to scale it, but also include automations within this whole process of scaling and support. So I think that comes from experience. So a lot of people, especially startup founders, would not, without much of technical or previous experience, might understand that. And this is the advantage that experienced founders, I mean experienced first time founders, actually bring to the table, which is they've worked on such problems before. They've been able to identify gaps and potential pitfalls that can happen. And these are some of the advantages of working with experienced folks. It's actually underplayed quite a lot, but it doesn't. Because there's so much experience already. You know that you've seen this problem before. You know what the solution to it is, and it's almost taken for granted sometimes. And that's I think the biggest advantage that we bring to the table, apart from being able to make changes quickly, being able to provide a great user experience, being able to control a lot of things, and get that fast decision making into act. But yes, like everything in this world, there is also some things that we might not be great at. It is it could be enterprise grade security, and the certain integrations that you would want to have very specific about, and that you would want to be connected with, and all those things will probably take time, but as startups we are well positioned to kind of make that happen pretty quickly as well. But that being said, like while we talk about how we have scaled from where we were to where we are today, what has been some of your lab and clinic conversations over the recent times? And while you've seen this scale, what have those latest conversations been? Has something evolved over time, or have you seen the same pattern continue?
I think more or less, I would say the pattern. I think the pattern is still the same, I would say, but I think the occurrences of those conversations have the frequency of those conversations have gone up. So I think what people are seeing is also what's changing at a macro level, which is impacting those conversations. I think a lot of demand is coming from within the local labs, and I think the labs we work with, some of the biggest labs in UK, and I think what we are seeing is that there's a lot of demand from the dentists who want to now source from within the geography or within the lab that they already work with. And when I say source, we're talking about sourcing aligners from there, and rather than getting it from US, from Costa Rica, for example, or South Asia or China. So I think there are kind of micro bubbles that are forming within each geography, and I think the labs are seeing that demand is kind of coming back to the same geographies, and I think they are looking for expansion, and they are now finding that their existing systems or no systems. So some of the labs are still using excels, waiting for the physical prescription form to arrive. So they're seeing that because of that high demand, that the existing systems are not scalable. And if they have to give the best experience to their dentist, they have started looking into the other softwares and workflow solutions that are out there. And a lot of them are going on internet, talking to their friends and colleagues in the industry, or kind of attending trade shows and talking to other people. So I think there is that chatter that there is a lot of talk about efficiencies, scalability, systems that has not been there 3 years ago. And I think with the new tariffs that are coming in, or the talks about tariff, if they're not implemented at all, at the level that we are talking about, I think it will further bring the business within the geographies rather than it being a global supply chain. Now, having said that, it may not be true for all countries, but definitely that's what we are seeing amongst the clusters of the customers that we are talking to.
Great. So, maybe let's just quickly double click on that, right? So you spoke about how you're seeing a lot of, labs are seeing a lot of growth and happen in micro bubbles within, different geographies. Now, how has SmileGenius like played out, do you think? And how do you like, just want to give you viewers of this podcast some experience around, how have you sort of met those needs? Like, yeah, maybe I'll stop there.
Yeah, no, I think I'll bring you back, and I think it's very early days, right? So I think the way we met the needs is the character of the company or the culture within the company, right? It's kind of we want to solve problems, right? This is what we started the episode with. So I think it's about solving those problems. So initially we were not we did not have labs as our customers. We were only selling to clinics. So we realized that no, the actual customer is the lab, because the lab has the relationship with the dentist. And we changed our product, like focusing on purely on clinicians and lab being the primary communication channel. But then, as and when we hear kind of how the market is shifting, our clients and our customer success team, you mentioned about the lean customer success team that we have. I think that's the biggest source of input to us in terms of what's trending, what's happening, what are customers finding problem in dealing with certain business situations, and can our product solve that problem. So it's not what new things we can launch which no one needs. It's kind of taking it from the customers, being close to the customers, and I think taking it back, discussing it internally, finding different options that might suit the customers. While we are doing that, we also kind of talk to other customers, that will that problem also solve their, will that solution also solve their problems. And I think that's where it's then implemented, and then we launch. So I think there's so many examples, and I think, Vikas, you can give more examples on those fronts. But I think there are smaller tactical changes that we bring. Batches and phasing, we do batches and phasing. We never thought we would be doing that. Giving more power to the labs. And I think I'll ask you, Vikas, to go into that why did we, one of the examples is we gave a lot of authority and control to the labs. And can you walk us through that, why that decision was taken, to bring it back a step, and give them more authority towards managing the cases versus relying on the dentist to do it all the time?
Yeah, yeah. I think one of the biggest pieces is you can't change somebody's behavior overnight, right? So changing behaviors is a very difficult and almost impossible task to do, straight away if you want it, especially if you're a small company. So what we had to do was to kind of take a step back, and like you said, we had to give the power back to labs, because a lot of the initial workflow that we built out was that the clinician would take more control than the lab would. And then we had to slowly shift that power back to the lab, because there were so many offline things that were happening that were not, that were not aware, that we were not aware about. And it was pretty important to make sure that, the labs had a 360-degree view of not just the cases that they were receiving, but also being able to create cases on behalf of these clinics, which kind of came out as a complete surprise for us, that there are these so many like offline methods that the dentist would still follow even after even after there's a software for them to use, because that behavior change does not happen overnight. And we wanted to make sure that that the adoption happened not just from constant push, but also also ensuring that the lab had that delta, and in making sure that whatever offline cases used to come, that used to kind of go back and channel back through the portal. And the more and more the dentists started to see the portal activity happen, they slowly started moving into the portal. And that's, I think, what we have predominantly seen is that dentists took a lot of time initially to adopt it. But the more and more cases that they saw through the portal, they were like, yep, this portal is actually helpful, because they went on this self discovery journey. And then they said that, yep, I'm able to see multiple plans. I'm able to like approve what I want. I'm able to tell the lab exactly what I need. And I think that I think was a fantastic set of different features that we built out to make sure that the whole ecosystem was interconnected. And I think one of the great features that we also recently spoke about was how there has been treatment plan link generation has been a big vertical within dentistry that causes a huge causes a huge you know huge revenue sort of loss for these labs, and it kind of undercuts them. And then whatever treatment plans that they create, every time they want to share, we know that there's a cost to it for sharing. And I think that was one of the features that we recently built out, which was allowing these labs to be able to share those links, and not just share any link that looks a little mundane, but again, going back to the earlier mode of giving them great user experience of sharing that link with any of the clinicians that they want, and making sure that a lot of the challenges that traditionally exist within the existing solutions are sort of addressed as well, which is the link never expires. The link can be kept as long as the lab wants to keep them, and all that is so much configurable. And the biggest, I think, advantage was that the dentist is now able to see the IPR and attachment changes as well, as they're actually seeing the model kind of go from stage 0 to stage n. And I think that's one of the big advantages we kind of offer through this feature. So I think overall, we've had a lot of these learnings like phasing, like TP viewer link, and so on. But that being said, have you like come across any sort of myths within dentistry that you've people that just tend to believe, and then we have seen that actually that's not true?
I think myths. I wouldn't call it myths, but I think one of the clarifications of some of the definitions, I would say, right? So, which I'm trying to do, right? So one of the obviously the podcast that we did, there's one session that we talked about the digital dentistry, right? That was the previous name of the podcast, and the definition of the digital dentistry is bit very much kind of biased towards hardware, scanners, printers, right? So whenever, if you go to any trade show and you go to a digital dentistry, let's say an event, you will see that no one is talking about software. Now they talk about the software that enables that hardware, but there is no standalone digital dentistry kind of element of only software workflow solutions. What are we doing and all that? It's heavily kind of biased towards hardware, and that's what digital is, the definition of digital for them. And anyone that is talking about digital, they're missing out on not addressing the software element, which is the driver of that hardware, right? And I think that's where, I wouldn't call it a myth, but I think it's a lack of understanding, and there are biases towards those definitions. And I think that's where we are trying to create our own segment or a category within the digital dentistry, where people start talking about software and the needs of software as well, and the value it brings in to not just help them launch quickly, but also to scale up and reduce costs. This is what we are seeing more and more, is the optimization of the operations, which is what the labs are loving, because I think their commercial directors are loving, or the finance team is
Yeah.
loving, right? It's kind of how we can optimize and reduce that unit cost of everything that they're shipping out, and make them scalable as well. So I think that's where I would say we haven't broken that myth or that lack of understanding, but I think we are doing our part to address that by kind of sharing content such as this today.
Great, great, awesome. So now that we have discussed so much about what SmileGenius, who we were, what SmileGenius was, and what it has become today, maybe we'll start off with a personal sort of a rapid fire round. So we'll go with, maybe you can go first, and then I can go
I think so.
next. So coffee or tea?
Oh, you want me to answer? I think I'm a coffee person. I think I love coffee. Tea, I'm very much like weekly. Weekends would be tea. Weekly would be like more, weekdays would be coffee. But I think I'm more of a coffee person. I guess
So
I think
work
you are
time
also a coffee
coffee.
person.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So work time coffee, relax time is tea. Okay. So
Kind of,
who's
yeah.
more organized between, between the both of us, I guess.
I think you are more organized. I would say I'm more. I want to be organized. That's my answer. but I think that I would definitely I think you're more organized than me. Like we discussed, we were taking our train ride back from a city to Dublin, and we were talking about cleaning up your inbox, right? So that tells you that how much I still have 2,000 emails unread on my inbox. A lot of them are not useful, but not organized enough, I would say.
Great. Yeah, I can't sleep if I have 2,000 emails in my inbox waiting for me. But what's that one startup that you admire a lot?
I think there are a lot of startups that I admire. Obviously, Stripe comes on my mind a lot. I was recently looking at one of the videos that the founders posted. They're kind of Irish people, so there's a lot of lot of talks about Stripe. I would say Irish company Mana Drone. I think the reason I love it because it's the image that they project. The founder, the product. It feels more sexy, I would say, in a way that yeah, there's a fun part to it. And I think that's where probably something we need to learn, that how we can make a B2B SaaS company like SmileGenius more kind of attractive on the content side of these things. But I think Mana Drone, because it's a drone delivery, and it's a fun part, delivering, showing how they're picking up McDonald burgers and dropping it in the areas around you, right? I think that's funny, and I think it's interesting, and I think it's curiosity, and then if people try that. So I think it's a very good marketing stunt that they do, and I think the product is awesome as well, of course. And what about you? Which startup do you
I
admire?
think one of the recent ones, especially in the last couple of years, that I've admired quite a lot has been Duolingo. I think their mission I love their mission, which is making education accessible to everyone. But the way that they've gone about it and used gamification to basically power that mission has been phenomenal. So, I just love you spoke a little bit about, how Manadrone has made it sexy by, because they're first of all deep tech, they're able to like show something and, all that marketing stuff that happens. I think it's almost an equivalent as to what Duolingo does as well, but in a different way. Wherein they've introduced these fun-loving characters, they've gotten so much appeal from customers that that they've used gamification so well and the tactics so well that they've hooked people to coming back to the platform over and over again. And so I'm one of them who've fallen into those traps. Been doing Spanish lessons for over a year now, and it just shows that it's working out. It's successful. The whole mechanism of how they make someone come back is actually working. And people who I know who are using Duolingo, once they started and they were on that, they finished this 100-day mark on Duolingo, have not stopped ever since. So that kind of shows how sticky the product is. So that's great. And what's your most used app besides obviously SmileGenius and probably Zoom?
I think I won't go into WhatsApp. I think everyone's answer would be WhatsApp. I think apart from that, I would say Gmail, calendar, Google
Outside
Calendar.
work, I guess. That's the
Yeah,
question.
outside work. I think I love reading news and kind of so I think in the last 1 week, 2 weeks, I would say, I think Financial Times. I always kind of fancy, it looks good when you're reading an orange colored newspaper which says Economic Times or Financial Times. So I always fancied, even before I did my MBA, and I think I never told you that. I always fancied that, that orange look, it sets it apart. And I never understood what finance me meant or what economics was. And then as and when I kind of understood and did whatever studies and all that, so this is, I think they had some sort of subscription which was £1 for 4 weeks or something. So I've just subscribed to it. But I think that's where most of my time would be outside of work, and in between work and Netflix. I would say that would be Financial Times. What about
Cool.
you?
I
If
didn't
you
know you had time for Netflix. So that's actually
no,
nice.
okay. What about you? Outside of Duolingo, okay, not Duolingo. Yeah,
Outside of Duolingo, I'd say YouTube probably, and
yeah, yeah.
Spotify. I think these two are the apps that, especially YouTube, where I follow a lot of like different tech updates. I follow a lot of sports. I follow IPL now. IPL is the season, and for me, I think my app behavior shifts based on season. So if there's a World Cup or if there's if there's anything happening like a major event in football or cricket, I'm probably on that app quite a lot than other apps. So I mean, unfortunately, IPL was called off today, but for whatever's happening, which is not great. But I think that's where I'm from. But
I
what is
forgot. I
like
think YouTube was also one of my. I forgot Financial Times. I think YouTube before Financial Times. But yeah, yeah. Go on.
right? So what tech are you most excited about outside of dentistry?
I think obviously AI in general. I love exploring what are the different answers I can generate out. It's not generating posts or anything, but Chat GPT and kind of helping me as an extension of myself. I think I'm enjoying that. And anytime when I'm faced with the problem of, let's say, reading a legal document or reading a medical report, right? So I'm not waiting for calling up someone and taking assistance. My first go-to kind of tech is your Chat GPT or similar models. And I think I'm just enjoying exploring, what are the different possible applications, and there's so many. And I think I've just scratched the surface, and every day I'm just learning about problem, chat GPT, solution, improvise, right? So I think that's where I would say that I'm pretty excited about in the actual application of that technology, not just using the technology for the sake of using it. What about you?
No, I think I'm probably along the same lines. I love the fact that you not just spoke about ChatGPT, but you spoke about how you are able to like do things in a much more quicker fashion, right? And I think it's been a game changer for all of us in the last 1 2 years since it's been out. And I think what is very exciting for me is how does AI or any sort of an AI tool, which is agentic AI, which a lot of people are calling it today, is how does it like take up multi application, communication, distribution of information, and all that. So I'm very excited to see how do we go about building something that can say, for example, if I've done an email on Gmail, it should go to my Slack and it should send a message to the group, make an announcement post for LinkedIn and whatnot, right? So that I think the idea of making that happen, I think is pretty cool. I don't think we're too far away from that. We are probably much closer to it than what I kind of think. But yeah, I think that's what I'm most excited about. It's just making us efficient, and I think that's what I'm obsessing about a lot.
Yeah, yeah. I think efficiency is everyone is looking after efficiencies, and I think that's where
Yeah,
I think people should be exploring that
yeah,
more than what everyone else is doing. Okay, cool. So I think let's do the final wrap up. I think last question. I think a lot of people. I know that you work with your team to prepare the newsletters, telling our customers what's next for Smile Genius and what do we do. But I think let's hear it out in terms of what's what are we planning without obviously telling everything, but in terms of the direction that we are headed, and where what are the key things that people should be expecting from Smile Genius in the next, let's say, 3 to 6 or 12 months. So I think let's start
yeah.
from there. Yeah.
I think we did speak about strategy being so tactical, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes there is again this mission that you have, and you want to go after it, right? So, huge announcement is about to come, on our way, in a few weeks' time. But so far we have been addressing massive problems for the lab communication side, but now we will be soon starting to address some of the biggest challenges that DSOs see, and that just culminates everything together so well for us as a company because we are solving similar use cases across two different channels. So that helps us with go to market motions and whatnot. So it's an extension of what we are already doing. Just that we are making sure that the other party on the other side is also seeing the full benefit out of it. So just doubling down more on communication, which then also means that there's an exciting product coming up for them.
Yeah. And I think just to add to that, I think the essence is, although the model is the same, like again, it's an extension to what we're doing, but the problem that we are solving is still the same, that we are trying to create more time for any party who's involved in this ecosystem of dentistry. Like that's our North Star. Right. Within that, we have different tactics, different products, different features. But I think at the end of the day, it's about saving time. Like, can we do something to save time for these labs? Can we do something to save time for these DSOs? So I think that North Star will always be, what can we do more, use, leverage the technology and the skills we have to optimize the operations, create more efficiency, and save those users some time and money, of course, but time, more or less, because I think time is something that you cannot recover. So I think that's where, that would be our North Star, going
Absolutely.
forward.
I think with that efficiency also comes transpiring into financial, financial advantages as well. It's not just through savings that, this new product will also help the DSOs, as well as labs to be able to have a lot more transparency in their finances, also making sure that, right people are, getting paid the right amount of money and paid faster as well. So all of these, different financial advantages are an automatic transpiration of all the admin work that we're saving underneath.
Great. So I think, Vikas, we should wrap up. It's been a long podcast episode. So I think what we'll do is, I think what we agreed is that we'll do, every fortnight, a BTS, which is behind the smile or behind the scenes for this behind the smile segment. And I think it was great to have this first chat. For thanks for coming along and playing along with me. Usually it's me, doing a solo, or having a guest over here. So I think it's good. It will give people more visibility, around Smile Genius. It will bring more transparency to, to the industry that we are serving. And I think also sharing, our rationale. I think a lot of things that we addressed today is kind of what is our thought process. And I think people want to see the reasoning behind the object, right, or the product that they see. So I think it's good that we come into these calls and share that. And that's the whole essence of this, BTS segment that we are talking about. So thanks for coming along, because I know that your day is usually very busy, but I think, we should do more of these.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Thank you so much.